everyone. So, are we good? Are we good? Is it on? Can you guys hear me? Yes. All right, so, do you guys remember when we were kids? And we used to ask questions. Why is the sky blue? Where do babies come from? What are cooties? We agitated for answers, begged on our parents' coats, harassed our friends, and never seemed to not have a question up our sleeve. But somewhere along the line, we lost that enthusiasm. When we were little, parents would come up to us, pinch our cheeks, hug us, and encourage that curiosity. It was endearing. It was how we learned. But we got lazy, me included. At some point, it became inconvenient, embarrassing, and unnecessary. We were asked enough hard questions in class. But is that really the case? I thought a lot about that, about hard questions, about the importance of asking them. Because if it is indeed how we learn, how we grow, why then stop? So I started asking them. I stand before you today as an activist, as an advocate, not because I was born with some sort of predispositioned knowledge and purpose, and that I was meant to be this way, and I had all the recourses and resources to be this way, but because I chose a title for myself. I embraced the lifestyle and what it entailed, and I ran with it. And I really had no idea what I was doing when I started, but I grew into the role by asking hard questions. And I started with a lot of the questions that we ask ourselves in our head. Why am I here? Do I belong? Who am I going to become? Who do I want to be? But I also started asking a lot of other questions, harder questions. Like, why do I wear boys' clothes? Where did that come from? Who taught me that? Like, how does religion influence my identity, if at all? Should it? And why do I believe anything at all? These were questions that I still don't have the answers to, but I started asking. And they've defined my development, my childhood, and my future. And the way that they've done so is through my story. My story of hard questions, of change, and hopefully of progress. So to give you some context, as stated in the intro, I'm a 17-year-old American Muslim, Bangladeshi, living in Princeton, New Jersey, born and raised. And I'm here today to you to talk about hard questions in Moscow. So how did I get here? Right? Where did I come from? Who am I? I came from a place that might be familiar to a lot of you, suburbia. From the white picket fences of Princeton, New Jersey, that's where I grew up. But my lifestyle and my life were not defined by white picket fences. I grew up in a fairly conservative American Muslim household, but I also grew up attending an all-boys Catholic school. And that juxtaposed reality really informed a lot of the ways that I identified and how I interfaced with my identity. And I learned to become comfortable with my American Muslimness, with my identity as a student, with speaking up for myself, and through understanding others. But more than that, I also had to ask myself questions, and had to answer a lot of questions. At an all-boys Catholic school, a lot of people had a lot of questions about Islam, and I had to be prepared to answer them. At an all-boys Catholic school, I had to have a lot of questions, and answer a lot of questions about my own morality, and about faith, and about justice. But more than that, what really defined my childhood and my development was my home, my household. There were 12 kids in my grade at Princeton Academy. 12. And a lot of parents chose to send their kids to that school because it was sheltered. They could afford to shelter their kids in an environment where there wouldn't be a lot of outside influences, where they could control what their kids were exposed to. My parents were not at all like that. My parents and grandparents mandated that I watch the news. It was so important to them that I be an informed citizen, that I understood the realities around me, and that I knew that the bubble of my life in Princeton was not even close to remotely representative of the world. And that was really exemplified and furthered in second grade, in a turning point in my life. In second grade, I went back to Bangladesh for the first time over Christmas break, and I'm on Christmas break now. So this is 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, I left the airport in Bangladesh, and driving home to my grandparents' house, I vividly remember being in the car and beggars knocking on the windows with no eyeballs. And I was horrified. I started bawling and bawling and bawling. And I asked myself, how is this fair? What did they do to deserve this? Who is letting this happen? And I asked those hard questions. As a kid, like I said, we all did. But no one really had a good answer. Not my siblings, not my parents, not my grandparents. But then again, is there ever a justifiable answer to injustice? But I took those questions back home with me to Princeton Academy, and I began talking about injustice to my classmates. But they didn't really seem to care. They thought it wasn't our problem, or it was for later, or it didn't affect us. So like I said, I began to get a little lazy, complicit even. But again, my life changed in 7th grade. I switched from Princeton Academy to Princeton Day School, where I attend now. And it was a co-ed secular school. And it was there that I became aware of rigid gender norms for the first time. At Princeton Academy, there wasn't this idea of boys' things and girls' things. Whether you did theater or played sports, they were all boys' things. There were only boys in the class. But suddenly, at Princeton Day School, there was an expectation that because I was a boy, I should talk about girls in sports, girls in sports, girls in sports. And I wasn't down. I grew up at that all-boys school, and I grew up in a household of all girls. My parents were separated and divorced when I was in 3rd grade and 5th grade. And if my sisters were playing Barbies, hells yeah, so was I. And if at school, kids were playing theater and sports, hells yeah, so was I. So suddenly, at Princeton Day School, when people expected me to fit into this dichotomy, I became aware of a lot of things. That I was somehow othered or different because I didn't conform to a dichotomy, and that I wasn't the only one. That so many people were being inhibited because of who society told them to be. Because of these norms, these standards that are unfair and baseless. And I realized that it wasn't happening out of malice. No one was saying to somebody else, we don't like you because you're X. Right? We're not going to play with you because you're black. No one says that, not in Princeton, New Jersey anyway. Right? But what was happening was that when people didn't understand something, didn't understand somebody, their background, where they came from, they didn't make an effort. So that person felt othered, marginalized, ostracized. Or, if you were marginalized, ostracized, or othered, you felt you had to conform or change to fit in. And I saw this in a rising climate of so much injustice against so many types of people. And I asked myself, why is this happening? And what can I do about it? Because like I said, when I went to Bangladesh, I came home and I asked, why are they there and why am I here? And again I asked myself, how is this fair? How can we level the playing fields? So I let these thoughts ruminate, and I asked those questions. And at the end of 8th grade, I founded Redefy, with the idea that we have to ask these questions. Because the reason that people are being excluded, ostracized, belittled, made to feel other, is not because people are mean, not because people are evil, but because people don't understand. And how do we understand? We understand what cooties are when we ask our parents. Right? We understand what things are when we ask. So we have to ask questions and try to answer them. That's how we learn, that's how we progress, that's how we make change. So I founded an organization to do just that. I founded Redefy in 8th grade with the mission of defying stereotypes, redefining perspectives positively, embracing acceptance and tolerance, and creating an active community. And I could not stress to you enough how little I knew what I was doing. I had no idea what I was doing. Literally no idea. But I knew that these questions had to be answered, or at least tried to be answered. Because so many people were the question should have been, why are you the way that you are, right? Why are you different? Explain to me where your background is or how you come from. But instead, people were just saying, you are different, right, and othering. So I wanted to create a platform where we could have dialogue and share stories about these questions, right? Share each other's stories, because it really is so hard to hate somebody you know. And why is it hard to hate somebody you know? Because when you ask questions, when you try to understand people, you can't hate them. You know their story, you know their context, you know where they're coming from. So I created a platform to empower those stories, to embolden them, to share them. Because when we start with the empathy, there's so much ground that we can work on to create progress and to create change and to promote justice. So I did that. And I created the website, and I created the social media handles, and I went for it. I had no qualifications, no business doing this, but I did it. And soon after, I was confronted with a lot of hard questions. I started this organization to promote that, and I started getting questions. Do you guys remember Ask FM? Some of you might.
Oh my God.
And on Ask FM, I was getting a lot of hard questions, right? Who are you to start this? Why are you starting this? How can I get involved? And I became overwhelmed with how many people wanted to get involved, and the haters. Right? Those who said, who are you to do this? Why are you doing this? How is this your place? But I became bettered by both of them. Because through the supporters, I restructured and innovated my organization to allow people to engage with it. And through the haters, I introspectively looked at myself and decided who I wanted to become to embody the values that I was preaching about. And I became bettered by asking those hard questions and trying to answer them, and by being asked questions. And I'm not here today to talk about my accomplishments in the organization. You heard a little bit about it in the intro, but yeah, we've had enormous success. We started with myself and 4 other of my friends, and we're now a team of over 300. We have team members and chapters from places all around the world, like Panama, India, Jordan, etc. We've been in PBS, CCTV, MTV, etc. I've had the chance to dine with President Obama, to meet Hillary Clinton, and to be on the forefront of what it looks like to be a youth activist. But that's because of asking hard questions and so many people willing to ask those questions with me. And I've been to the White House 3 times. And when I go to those meetings and I sit at those round tables and I engage with journalists and I engage with high-level industry professionals, I realize how often I'm the only young person in the room. I'm the only Muslim in the room. And I ask hard questions. Because when you're not at the table, people assume one of 2 things. They assume you don't want to be there, or they can speak for you. Neither of which are ever okay. So when I'm at that table, I make the most of it. Because let me be very frank with all of you. We have to cut the bullshit. We get to these tables, right, and we waste so much time and energy. We waste so much time and energy with the small talk, pivoting, adjusting to get to that moment where we ask the hard question, or we pop the question. We do not have time to waste when so many are suffering. So when I get to these rooms, I ask people, why am I the only young person here? Why am I the only Muslim here? What does that say about the worth that you're assigning to my existence? I come prepared with questions that provoke people to action. Because otherwise, what am I doing with that seat? But more than that, I look around and I think of ways that I can empower more people to sit at that table with me. And I've done that because I realized I've sat in these places, right? And I looked around, there's no one else under 30 in the room. And I'm 17. And I think to myself, I'm not some sort of exceptional, outstanding, like so much smarter than everybody else. I should be the only 17-year-old here. You guys have great ideas. you guys know your stuff. You guys should be at tables too, right? So I founded a youth consulting firm, Juve Consulting, last year. Because it is ridiculous to me that I go around and I meet youth experts, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, white guys sitting around a table deciding that we still like the word rad. And you see those cringy advertisements that they made to be tailored to us that are just horrible. And why? Why are there teen experts when teens exist in a three-dimensional world where we can advocate and speak for ourselves? So now we do just that. We profit off of our own narrative, and hopefully companies, campaigns, nonprofits profit more by engaging with us. Because who knows us better than ourselves? And again, I've been extremely fortunate. We've built an amazing team. We have over 10 clients. We were in Bloomberg Businessweek magazine last week. And I'm really fortunate to how far we've come. And I'm really fortunate to be in a position where I'm asking hard questions about what is Generation Z? What are youth? What are we? Can I speak unilaterally for a generation? No, absolutely not. But I'm asking these questions, and moreover, I'm getting asked hard questions. What do you even know? Who are you to do this? But I think, and I innovate, and I engage with diverse individuals all across the world, like you guys, because I recognize the potential that we can have when we come together and make use of our voice. That brings me to my next question. What can we do with our voice? Because to me, that's my strongest asset, and hopefully many of yours. Because we all have a story. We all have that fire in our stomach that gets us going. How do we tap into it? I was not the person you see before you today when I was a freshman. Again, I grew into this role by asking hard questions and seeking answers. So when I think about what is my voice, I created the Muslim Club. I blogged for the Huffington Post. I created platforms that allow me to engage with my mission, to engage with my narrative and share it. More than that, I think about ways that I can utilize my voice to engage in diverse and innovative areas, like Model UN. I'm sure many of you guys do it. And have you guys ever been in committees in Model UN, where at the end the chair says, I wish that the world leaders were like you guys, that the change makers were like you guys. I'm sure some of you have had to heard that, right? And I always think to myself, well then why aren't we? Why aren't we those change makers? I just gave a TEDx talk last year in Panama entitled Our Age Does Not Limit Our Activism. Because the idea that our activism or our efficacy is for later is ludicrous at best. So when I think about those ideas that we have in Model UN, we can influence them in a real way, which brings me to my next question. How can we influence? So I thought about those ideas. I have all these great ideas, and I have a lot of friends and a lot of amazing team members who have these great ideas. How do we advance them? How do we influence with them? So I've interned for the US Department of State. I've worked for presidential campaigns. I've interned for my congresswoman. I've influenced policy. Because we can take those ideas, we can take those dreams that we all have, that fire in our stomach, and we can push it forward on real global and national and local levels. We all have the capacity to do that. I'm not special. I asked questions and I've sought answers. But there's still so many questions I don't have answers to. Will I ever overcome my own implicit bias? Will I ever be prejudice-free? Who am I? What does tomorrow look like in a today that is sometimes so bleak? Am I even right about anything? There are so many questions that I'll never have the answers to. But I stand before you today to implore you guys to ask hard questions. Because I believe that when we seek answers, we find progress. When we look for solutions, right? When we look at the world, and what I want you guys to do is look at the world. Look around this room right now, right? Look around, think about this world, and think of one thing that you'd like to change, right? One problem. It can be as micro as macro as you'd like. One problem, something wrong with the world, right? Whatever comes to mind first, and ask a question about it. How can I change it? Why does it exist? Ask a hard question about it. And think of one way you can be engaged or look for a solution or an answer to that problem. Because I believe from the bottom of my heart that if everyone in our generation, the next generation, Generation Z, whatever you want to call us, the plurals, ask these hard questions, looks for solutions, tomorrow is bright. Because when we ask questions, when we look for answers, I believe that we'll all discover something beautiful. We might even discover ourselves. Thank you.